remind everyone, in compliance with Executive Order 20/20 and N35/20 issued by Governor Newsom on March 12th and the 21st, respectively, this meeting will be live streamed and recorded via the BUSD YouTube channel link here. Okay. Want to report out that there was nothing to be reported in the closed session, so I ask everybody to please stand and join me in the pledge. I think maybe she's to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'm going to need to pull out of the Zoom for just a second. We are having a little bit of a backlash from the earphones that we're using in the system. I'm working on speakers and headphones. So I'm going to I apologize for that. We're going to now begin with an approval of the agenda, please. Can I have a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing the agenda is approved as written. There's no highlights for me. If so, we'll go right to report and follow nothing more.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and anyone who's able to tune in and watch the meeting with us this evening. Just a few things from me. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our teachers and all of our staff for continuing to do a great job in the distance learning model. So proud of everybody, and they really held it together. We're just thrilled with the effort, and we're almost done. The last day of school is next Friday, so we're closing out the year and wrapping things up. And again, I know from the trustees and myself and all of us, we thank everybody's wonderful effort with that. I'd also like to thank our food services for continuing to feed the kids. They've done such a great job around that, and really been heroes. Like I said in the video that I sent out to staff and the community, we're beginning to turn our planning lens toward what school could look like in the fall. I'd like to thank Dr. Beetson and Ms. Rice for putting together what we've called the design team. And we had our first meeting today, and we had a good group. President Ferrucci's has joined us there, and I think we've got upwards of 20 people close to it, I think. And we started off that effort with the, thinking about what school could look like in the fall. So we are doing our darndest to put some prototypes and some models together that we will share with you, dear board, next Thursday, the 4th, in the community, so you can see what we're thinking about at that point, knowing that we'll have more planning to do between that point and the beginning of school. And then I think we all know we live in very uncertain times. So what we put together on the 4th, we have to be flexible, because based on the kind of information we hear from state officials, the health department, et cetera, it could cause those plans to change. but we will continue to do that planning, be transparent, share that information with everybody, and solicit feedback, certainly from the community, and strive to keep everybody well informed. So closing the year out, planning for next year. And then one quick thing, I wanted to recognize some students. As school goes on and students continue to do great work and do things that they should be recognized for. I'd like to recognize 3 students, Krishna Mandal, Gabrielle Malta, and Zachary Green, because they were recognized by the 9th Circuit Court of Appeal for the essays that they wrote to them. So that's a really wonderful accomplishment for those students, and I just wanted to call out their names and for us to give them a nod of recognition. Good work to everybody, and that's it from the superintendent for now. We've got a lot of work to do between now and the end of the year, but we're going to be in good shape. We're going to get there. So, thank you.
We are working on a little bit of a technical difficulty still with Diane's mic, so we'll be returned shortly. Thank you, Superintendent. Do we want to go ahead and start board reports? Diane, do you want me to start board reports?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Definitely have a little technical difficulty tonight.
We will go ahead and start to board reports while Diane works on her technical issues.
Dr. Holt, one other thank you to Kiwanis for giving $10 a student to the Benicia bookshop for gift cards, one for each 3rd grader. So we want to thank Kiwanis for doing that. It's very generous of them.
It's a wonderful donation. Glad we could recognize them. Board reports. Do we have a board member that wants to start?
Okay.
I think go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank all the teachers and staff and administrators, management, everybody for doing such a great job with the distance learning and just taking it all and making it work. It's not been easy, I am sure, but I really want people to know that we, as a board, we really appreciate all your effort. Sorry. Also, I wanted to note that there was a new scholarship that was started this year at Benicia High, for Benicia High students and for Liberty High School students. And it was in conjunction with the Kyle Highland Foundation. And it was myself and my husband and George Highland and Barbara Javase that started the scholarship. And it's called RISE, R-I-S-E, Benicia KHS Scholarship. And this was our first year that we were able to give students some money to help them with their future expenses in college. And the RISE stands for Recognizing Individuality with Support and Empowerment. And we had many meetings with a lot of, we got all the information from all the students, their applications, and then there was a group of people that met and went over all the applications. They volunteered to do this, and then they kind of rated them, and we came up with the top 3. And the last minute, we got a very generous donation from an anonymous supporter of $2,000. So that bumps up our scholarship in such a great. We have so much more money to be able to offer. This year, I just want to recognize Jose Gonzalez with a $1,500 scholarship, Sophia Arroyo with a $750 scholarship, and Isis Iverson with an additional $750 scholarship. First year out, and we hope to do this for many, many years to come. I'm just really proud of these students, and this year was based on how to overcome difficulties, what kind of things they had to overcome to be where they're at today. And I'm just really proud of them, and it was proud to be part of this, and I look forward to them to help with this in the following years. So that is all I have to say.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd also like to add that there have been a lot of great work by all of our teachers. We've been able to view some recent accomplishments of our students, Miss Hall's art class and Miss Wright's drama students, still doing amazing things even during this school closure period. In addition, as board member Zeta referred to, the student awards banquet for the high school was online this year, and there were a lot of great scholarships awarded and many students that earned great honors, and so we want to recognize all of them. In addition, I know several of the board members, including myself, have been attending various online presentations on the budget situation for the state of California and for schools, as well as safe opening for fall. So we are continuing to try to educate ourselves on different options that are available to us to help our students move forward.
Thank you.
So
Okay, I think you both captured it all really well. I think we've all been engaged in different types of webinars, whether it was CSBA or the state of California, or sitting down here, or being, well, I guess Zoom meetings is what they were as we sat in on the design team and the budget meetings as well. Lots happening to education right now, and I think we're all kind of just hanging on and trying to learn as quickly as we can. The other thing with scholarships that'll be coming out is I've been part of the Rotary group, and they will be recognizing our Liberty High School kids with some scholarships at their promotion as well. So that'll also be exciting for those students. Okay, with that said, I'm going to move into comments. Public comments. Members of the public may submit comments on items on the agenda and any item within the jurisdiction of the school district in the following manner for meetings during the shelter-in-place executive order via Google form on the link that is provided. The public is willing to is invited to participate between 6 and 7 p.m. on the day of the meeting. The governing board allows speakers to speak at regular meetings on agendized and not agendized matters under public comment. Comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. By law, no action may be taken on any item raised during the public comment periods, and matters may be referred to staff for placement on a future agenda of the governing board. All right, at this point, we have one public comment that has been submitted, so I'm going to ask Dr. Holguin to read it, please.
Thank you for your patience. I believe we've resolved the technical issues and hope that you can all hear us clearly. I have one comment. The speaker wishes to comment on item number 13, and this comment is from Leanne Tagapera, a parent. It says, thank you to those members of the school board who posed questions and made statements at the last meeting supporting parents and students, particularly high school students and seniors during distance learning and the closure of schools. Parents appreciate your support in understanding how difficult distance learning has been over the past 2.5 months during the global pandemic and shelter in place. There has been a major upheaval in people's lives, which has resulted in mental stress and economic uncertainty. In addition, it has been difficult for students and parents without district-wide grading policy, applied uniformly and fairly to students during the closure of schools. Other districts throughout the Bay Area, state, and nation created district-wide policies over 2 months ago, following the requirements of the California Department of Education to hold students harmless. Please note that allowing teachers to have flexibility in deciding what grading policy to use for each student individually can lead to unfair and inconsistent treatment of students and is not transparent in the system. Under this method, each student can be subject to a different grading system. For example, at least one BMS teacher is allowing students to use their third quarter grade as their semester grade. And BHS band students were allowed to do this as well, but not other students. Additionally, some teachers are teaching only the essentials and reduced assignments, while others have continued to provide a large amount of work, essential and otherwise, and in many cases with little instruction. I and others, including the 25 high school students who provided public comment on May 7th, have advocated for a fair and uniform grading policy that will apply equally to all students. It's been a week since the board decided that under existing policy, students could be graded using a pass-no-pass system. I believe offering such a system is a good idea. However, parents still don't know about this. When will BUSD inform parents? Parents I have talked to wonder why an email wasn't sent out to them right away. I appreciate the board's recognition that not having access to such a grading policy has been disadvantageous and harmful to our students, as evidenced by the number of students with lower or failing grades in the fourth quarter. However, it would have been better to provide this admission that using pass-no-pass grading system was allowed earlier in the quarter instead of waiting to state that on May 21st, that it was allowed the whole time. For example, information about the allowance of the use of pass-no-pass could have been provided in the distance learning plan released on April 24th and at the school board meeting on May 7th, or in the many emails sent by the district to the BH and BHS administration in response to parents' emails or by teachers. The fact that the BHS principal had to be asked to alert teachers that the MOU allowed them to use pass-no-pass as an alternative grading would lead one to believe that teachers were not already aware of this. Also, if pass-no-pass can be utilized as alternative grading, the term used in the distance learning plan and MOU, what other grading systems can be used? Can the option other districts are using, that the third quarter grade be used as the spring semester grade, with the opportunity be improved in the last quarter, be used? That is the option that I and others have been advocating for. I and others appreciate that the district has proposed changing the policy of using incompletes instead of Fs due to the high number of students failing classes since the start of the distance learning. However, again, how does this protect college-bound seniors who need to receive at least 70% in their A through G courses in order to not have their college acceptance rescinded? I believe the statements made by board members last week about the fear of college acceptances being rescinded were cavalier and not supported by official statements released by the UC system. My daughter plans to attend UC Davis, and as a product of the UC system myself, I have read the material released by the UC system. The UC system has specifically stated that UC is not suspending minimum grade requirements, but rather allowing students whose schools have moved to pass-no-pass grading systems this term to continue to earn the credit they need to be eligible for UC. Students will still need to achieve a minimum GPA of 3.0 or 3.4 for non-residents, with classes for which they are able to earn a letter grade. High school A through G courses completed with the letter grade must be passed with a C- or better grade. Therefore, the UC system has not changed its requirements that students must receive a grade of 70% or higher in all A through G classes. See the link and it provides an admissions link. As you heard at the last board meeting, grades have dropped with many students receiving Fs, with many more students receiving Fs than before, and other low grades. Parents and students have been struggling nationally during school closures, and it's been very hard on teachers as well. Again, please provide email communication to all parents about the grading policy and the fact that the board has stated that PNP, or pass not pass, can be used. Please consider also allowing the use of third quarter grades with the opportunity to improve. Thank you again for thinking about seniors, all students, and parents. That concludes the comment. Are there any others? That concludes our comment section.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to
Diane, you're muted.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 11, the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the board to be routine and will be approved by the board in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items to be pulled or discussed. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent calendar passes. Thank you. Number 12 is a discussion item, and it is the governing board provides a public hearing on the 2021 budget using the information from the governor's revised budget item. So I am going to close the regular meeting and then open up the public hearing, and then Mr. Rahill, it will be yours. I'm closing the board meeting. I'm opening up the public hearing, and I'd like to call on Mr. Rahill, please.
Thank you very much. I have a series of slides to present to you tonight to talk about the current fiscal environment in the state of California and how that impacts our school district. And I'd like to go ahead and share my screen and walk you through several slides here. And should have that up on the screen now. If somebody can maybe just give me a nod that you can see it. Okay. Great.
That's good.
So we are all getting current updates on the economic effects of COVID-19 that it has on our economy and on our school district. It's coming after many years of economic expansion, but no one could have seen this coming as much as it has. So it's impacting all agencies, all people throughout the nation and the state. And it's new, so we really don't have a model to follow and how to address this. I like the last bullet on this page. The actual economic effects will not be known for months and years. So it's still going on. And I want to take just a moment to let you know these slides were provided by School Services of California, which is a school consulting firm that serves the school districts in the state. So this is a slide that shows percentage changes over the years for the U.S., the United States Real Gross Domestic Product, which is a tool that is used to show the U.S. The impact on the U.S. economy and how well it does. In any case, the Great Recession over 10 years ago, you can see some slight decreases, and then at the worst of it in Q4 of 2008, the gross domestic product took a minus 8.4% hit during that Great Recession. And the real purpose of this slide is to compare what happened 10 years ago to the current COVID-19 recession, and how there's been up the quarters leading up until the most recent Q1, and the projected Q2 is a tremendous hit on that GDP of a projected negative 43%. So the magnitude compared to what happened 10 years ago with the Great Recession is quite large comparing those two times. We're here in California. We basically follow how the nation performs. We're one of the biggest economies in the world, and what happens in California is it kind of mimics what happens throughout the world, really, because of our coastal geography and making us very reliant on international commerce. Right now, with the current May revision of budget assumptions, the state is projected to suffer $41.2 billion loss. And so that's made up of some of that in the current fiscal year that trickles over and compounds into the following budget year. And so it's a huge loss to the state of California revenues. Continued ongoing risks, the biological risks related to the coronavirus, all the testing and tracing, fiscal risks of unemployment and lack of federal stimulus measures that all states, not just California, relies upon, the performance of the international economy, and other issues out there, for example, like the Cold War. And so I think it's very safe to say at this point there are many risks to the state of California's budget, and we have this to remind us that it's still ongoing, and we're still getting information on a daily basis. Normally, at this time, after the governor provides a May revised budget, it goes to the legislature for them to go back and forth for the state to adopt a final budget in June, which is still that plan. But the question on this page is, will there be a revised budget after June? And the answer is almost a definite yes. There were tax payments that were deferred, and they won't know that until August when those are collected. So we're anticipating at least an August revised budget and possibly a mid-year revised budget on top of this June one. We usually focus on our general fund. We do have a child care and preschool fund that has been self-sufficient over the years. Those programs, there are some state subsidized programs that will also get a 10% reduction. And so we'll be working closely with our child care and preschool director to make sure we can continue to offer some services there and hopefully make those programs self-sufficient. As we watch the news, we've heard about the CARES Act. It's the Federal CARES Act, which was a round of money from the federal government that went to the states. It was broken up into a smaller pot of money called the federal GEAR and a larger pot of money called the federal ESSER. And so these funds are scheduled to be distributed. The larger pot, the smaller pot, it was for special projects, which we don't anticipate Benicia getting any of those funds. But the larger sum of money would go to school districts based on their Title I program. So that's a federal Title I program that serves some of our students in the free and reduced meal program. And we do have some participation in there, but it's low. The dollar amount for that is about $190,000. It's a one-time amount. And in this case, I think it's important to note that those funds were distributed based on Title I calculations. And unfortunately, that does not provide it provides a much lower amount for Benicia when compared to other school districts in the Solano County and in the state. If that was a per enrollment dollar amount, we would have gotten considerably more. So we look at all different types of aspects of school district budgets. And what this slide shows is what the statewide average reserve level is throughout the state of California. It's from 2018-19. The latest information that's available. And you can see Benicia is a unified school district. And so on average, school districts, unified school districts in California had a 17% reserve. And that helps agencies prepare for current recessions like the one we have right now. We'll be talking a little bit more about reserves later on. It does, when a local agency has a reserve, it does provide the district with the ability to be more strategic when you're facing fiscal crisis like we are now and considering reducing expenditures over the next several years. It gives you some opportunity to spread some of those budget adjustments over multiple years versus having to do it in any one particular year. With those local agencies reserved, the state of California does have a required minimum reserve. That's just what it is. It's a minimum amount. Nothing prevents a district from having more. And that for Benicia, that state minimum reserve is 3%. A district considers other things that are listed on this page, like declining enrollment, which provides less funding to your school. And that has been happening in our Benicia School District. We've now been declining in enrollment for the last 3 or 4 years. And that's a trend that's happening throughout the state of California. One of the other things that is included in the current May revision, as proposed by the governor, is basically IOUs. And what this chart attempts to show you is just in a few days, our school district was scheduled to receive its June cash payment from the state. We basically get our money split out monthly over the 12 months. But the state of California is strapped for cash. And so what this slide shows is they're basically giving us an IOU in June, and supposedly we will get that cash in July. So our district, like all districts, will now have to pay a much closer attention to our cash flow and make sure that we have enough money, enough cash on hand to pay our monthly bills. And if we don't, we're going to have to plan ahead so that we can talk with our Solano County Treasurer and see if there is opportunity for us to do short-term borrowings. So you might say, oh, 1 month isn't so bad. But if you jump ahead to April of 2021, according to this May revision proposal, they would defer April and May and June. And at this point, it says July 2021 ? Because they're really not sure if that cash would all come in July of 2021. So the postponement of receiving cash for 3 months is a little bit more serious, and will be requiring our district to monitor its cash flow and borrow as needed to pay the bills, which would come with some sort of interest charge, and there's a cost to that. But if the state isn't providing us the cash, again, we just need to make sure we have it on hand to make our expenditures. This is an additional slide that basically says the same thing. And I just have a couple more slides in this group, and I'll kind of convert over to what this all means for Benicia. So some summary, just a couple slides on summary and perspectives. Normally at this time, this is the public hearing on our school district budget for next year. Normally, we would also be having a public hearing on our LCAP, which is our Local Control Accountability Plan. But that has been postponed until the fall. The state of California has recognized there is tremendous fiscal pressures on school districts, and a big part of the LCAP was including programs and the dollars needed to do those programs. And so for this year, the state has postponed the LCAP, which would have normally been part of the public hearing or a separate public hearing tonight. And so more to come. We're going to continue to work on the LCAP and bring that back in the summer and continue work in the fall. There will be a state template presented on June 11th, which is just a short summary as to what the district is doing so far with the LCAP. The road ahead, it's a reminder that at this point in time, our school district uses the best information available to put its school budget together, which is the governor's May revision. The legislature is looking at that right now to see if they want to send it back to the governor with some recommended changes. The California Senate and the California Assembly, the legislature must both do that and approve a budget by June 15th. And then the governor must act on that by June 30th. So whether or not that happens, most likely something will be approved. The school district is required to provide its school budget. And a final thought in this group of slides, I think, is the second bullet. it's just important to keep in mind that there are still a lot of unknowns. We're still in the middle of the coronavirus and the fiscal impacts from that. And so one of the biggest next pieces of information for the state of California are those revenue collections over the summer to see how much is actually collected. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share another sheet, which starts to talk about what all this means to Benicia Unified. And hopefully you see the next screen up here for our 2020-21 budget financial report. And what we do with every budget, with or without a COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, is we look at what our key fiscal factors are. So with or without a fiscal crisis, what are kind of the big things that we take a look at? And we start with our known salary-related costs for the budget year. We have salary schedules that have steps and columns, and as people stay in the district and move on the salary schedule, there's a cost to that. We've adjusted that for attrition in 2021 when people leave and new people come in. But you can kind of see as you look across, it's about $400,000 a year. This is the 2020-21 is our budget year. That starts on July 1st, 2020. And we have 2 more years in these other columns out here. One of the things that Governor Newsom did in his governor's May revise is he did reduce the employer contribution into the retirement systems. And so we're actually seeing a slight savings in the budget year, which we're banking on. In the outer year, it's a little bit more. And unfortunately, because we were given a break in the budget year and the 1 year out, the rates would go back up and make up for the lower rates this year in 22-23. We'll monitor that for what actually happens. But in the budget year, we do have a break on the STRS, the retirement system costs. In the second section, we look at our other revenues. And unfortunately for Benicia, we're required to be part of a special ed regional group. We're part of the Solano County special ed group, and that organization decided to change the way it allocates revenues for programs, and that reduced our funding, our special ed funding, by $344,000. So Benicia was opposed to that change, but the group did decide and made the decision to make it. So we'll have to reduce our revenues by $344,000. That's an ongoing reduction. And at this point in time, the amount that we're getting from the federal government for COVID-19 is about $192,000. Again, that's just one time. It doesn't happen year after year, but it's something that we can use towards this effort. I'm going to scroll down, and what we have in this next section is considering our Lcff factors. That Lcff is the local control funding formula. That's how the state of California funds schools based on students attending school. We start by looking at what our student enrollment is, and you can see that, as I mentioned earlier, we are what's called a declining enrollment district because year after year we're having larger grade levels graduate, and that gets backfilled with smaller grade levels. The state gives you a 1 year hold harmless. So as an example, this coming school year, we're projected to lose 94 students. They give you a 1 year hold harmless. So that reduction of about 90 students based on attendance, that won't hit us financially until the year after. And so in 2021, this minus 31 is based on the previous year's reduction. And so we are budgeting a financial hit for a reduction of 31 students. About 25% of our student population is what is called unduplicated student population. It's a student who is in our free and reduced meal program, an English learner, or foster youth. So the school district rate is 25%. As we look at our student population and this declining enrollment trend, we are able to adjust staff over the years. If we have less kids, we take a look at what is needed, and we reduce staff for declining ADA or declining enrollment as we can. It's not always a perfect match, but we're able to reduce some staffing over the years. Prior to the COVID-19 coronavirus, our cost of living adjustment is an amount, it's a percentage that the state would give to school districts. There is a formula that they use to determine what the cost of living adjustment was. It's been, in the low percentages over the last few years. But due to the coronavirus pandemic, the fiscal impacts that have been caused by that, the net adjustment is actually about a minus 7.92%. So they're actually giving us less money than they did last year. They're required to calculate the cost of living, the actual one, and then what they do is they apply a deficit factor to that. But at the end of the day, it's about a negative 7.92% hit. We have at the bottom of the screen here, when we look at what that means to Benicia Unified, we just with the reduction in our Lcff funds, that's the biggest, the state funding that they provide to schools. It's about a $3.5 million loss in 1 year. And some of that is due to our declining enrollment, but the majority of that is due to the negative cost of living adjustment that's been applied to that state funding. In the outer years, even though that negative adjustment doesn't change, we're still taking a hit on our state Lcff funds because of the declining enrollment. If we have that declining enrollment, we will get less from the state. And so what that forces us to consider, and what is being proposed in this budget tonight, is a multi-year plan to try to address these lost funds over a multi-year plan, and starting in the budget year with a projected budget cut target of about $2 million. So you'll see in these future slides the need not just to cut and stop there, but to cut an additional amount. Under this plan, it would be another $1.5 million in year 2, which is 21-22, and at this point in time, another $1.5 million in the second year out in 22-23. I've got a few more slides here to keep talking through. Our retirement systems are a big important thing for our employees, and we just wanted to provide that information on the rates that we pay into those systems, and how we got a slight break, about a 1% break in that rate for 2021 for our certificated plan, and for our classified employees, it still increased, but it wasn't as big of an increase that was being proposed. So after we look at all of those fiscal factors, the cost of living adjustments, the declining enrollment, other revenues and expenditures, we go ahead and we provide them. We separate them out into our state Lcff components. We get some other state monies, some other federal monies, and local monies, which includes our special ed fund. So For our budget year 2021, given all of the current information that we have and the information from the governor's May revise, our district would have a budget of about $45.3 million. And you can see in the pie chart, most of that, this huge piece, and then this 5% piece, that's all that state LCFF fund. After we look at our revenues, we take a look at our expenditures. And so our school district, we're in the education business, and we provide those services through our staff, through our teachers and counselors and classified and administrators. And so we have our salary and benefit costs, which is a majority of our budget. And so you can see that at this point in time, if we look at all of the salary and budgets, we use 90% of that for our staff salary and benefits to provide those services. The other 10% is the discretionary stuff in supplies and utilities and services. So what we did to be in line with this multi-year plan of budget cuts over several years is, at this point, we have included the $2 million, an amount of $2 million in budget cuts. So this $47,778,000, that is reduced by a $2 million worth of budget cuts. And if those budget cuts do not materialize, then the expenditures would be $49,778,000. But for purposes of this budget, we'll be talking more about budget cuts in a little bit. We have included those budget cuts in this total. And so an important note is when we compare our revenues from our previous slide and this expenditure amount, our district would still be operating at a deficit. At the end of the year, we look at our district's fund balance, and that's what we start the year with. We add our revenues, we subtract our expenditures, and so we are looking to be at about $6.5 million at the end of the budget year. And that would include the state's minimum reserve, the local board policy reserve, and then we do have some carryovers of one-time monies. And so that is about, if you compare that $6.5 million to our operating expenditure budget, that's about 13.5%. And if you compare that to the statewide average at 17% from that earlier slide, it is less than that statewide average. The next slide is a scenario that is not included in our budget, but we wanted to show a slide that indicates what would happen to our district if we did not make any budget cuts. And so I just want to make sure before I show this is that it's a scenario. It's not what is being recommended, but it is a way to show what would happen to our district if no budget cuts were made. And what we have on this page is we have what our annual operating deficit would be for 3 years up at the top, and then what would be left over in fund balance at the end of the year according to this scenario. And I just wanted to, really make it really clear that this is not being recommended, but this is what would happen, and it happens really fast with no budget cuts, is the district's annual operating deficit would continue to increase year after year, and within 1 year, our district would go negative. And yes, the district would survive for 1 year, but in that very next year, in 21-22, according to this May revise and according to these budget assumptions, we would go negative. Now, there's checks and balances in place at the Solano County office and at the state of the California that would be alerted of this ahead of time, and that's when they get involved. But this scenario would show them that Benicia Unified continues to operate at a deficit. In 21-22, there would be no fund balance, there would be no cash, and at that point, that triggers the state to get involved and take over the operations of our school district or any school district that didn't have a plan to address these operating deficits and fund balances. So again, it's a slide that shows how quickly it can go into the negative if a district doesn't take action. I just have a few more slides on this, and then I'm going to wrap it up. This is basically the same page from the last time, but from the very last slide, but this one does have the proposal for multi-years of budget cuts or a multi-year plan. So again, up at the top, this shows what our annual operating deficit would be after budget cuts. And then this bottom part shows us what we would be left with in our projected fund balance after this plan with budget cuts. So normally a school district it's required to show the budget year plus 2 years. So we're required to show 2021 and 21-22 and 22-23. So we've extended that 2 years just for information to show you, based on the information we have today, how this crisis is probably going to go beyond this 3-year period. But according to this budget that we're presenting tonight, and with this multi-year budget cut plan, if the district does cut those $2 million, we would still be operating at a deficit in 2021. But when we look down below at what we would end up with in our projected fund balance, you can see that we would still have our 3% reserve and the local board policy reserve. What enables us to operate at a deficit and provide a multi-year plan is our ability to have these reserves or any of these one-time monies to dip into to help us get through this fiscal crisis. And so basically where the $2.4 million deficit is coming from is it's coming from any one-time monies that we've been able to save over the past few years. As we look at the following year, we'll call it year 2 in 21-22, we want to try to cut, and according to this plan, would cut another $1.5 million, which would, bring down our operating deficit. But it is a deficit, and it continues to spin down any one-time monies that we have. This multi-year plan, again, of ongoing budget cuts, another 1.5. We're still operating at a deficit. That in that year, according to the governor's May revise and our current information, our current assumptions, it does go into the local board policy reserve. It doesn't reach the state minimum reserve, but it starts getting closer. And what this page shows, if we were to extend 2 years out and not make any more budget cuts, it would be in that 23-24 year where we would have to dip into that state minimum 3% reserve. We wouldn't have anything else. And then it would go negative in 24-25. So at that point, the county office and the state starts talking to you and does what's necessary to help a district in that situation. So at this point, as a school district, we need to know this extended information. It's not required for us to report it at this point, but it's important for us to know. Again, we've got multiple years of work to do, and how relatively quickly this can impact a school district. This page helps to identify why a school district keeps a reserve. Our California schools, Benicia Unified, were primarily funded by the state. You can think back on that pie chart I showed about our revenues. The biggest piece of that pie was from the state of California and those Lcff funds. The state and the state earns its money from the state tax revenue it connects, and it's pretty volatile based on personal income tax and corporate tax and sales tax, and that's yet to be determined on to what their state tax revenues will actually be collected. So if that's volatile, it also impacts the state funding for schools. So we just want to be prepared for that, so we're not forced into any really backed into the corner making decisions. We do have those automatic increases to our annual operating costs, our salary schedules, our contributions into the retirement plans. We have to account for less funding when we have less kids enrolling in our schools. We have a wonderful food service program. We're offering free meals to kids right now. The state's helping us out a little bit, but it is tapping into some of the reserves that separate food service program has been providing to our district. Other districts in Solano County can't pay. The food service program doesn't pay for itself, and the general fund has to provide contributions. So at this point, our school district hasn't had to do that, and we're going to try to continue to make that a self-supporting program. But this is just a note that in case it doesn't, the general fund might have to contribute to that program to provide food to students. A similar application can be made to our preschool and childcare programs. Our goal would be for those to be self-sufficient. A reserve helps a school district pay its bills when the state gives you an IOU and says, I might pay you in a month or 2 or 3 or longer. We have to manage that ongoing deficit. We need to put a multi-year plan together before it becomes out of hand and out of control. Obviously, we're here today because of the COVID-19 coronavirus. We're in the middle of it, or whatever part of this we're in, and just the economic effects are really unknown for months and years. We constantly get updates. Being that we're in the middle of the coronavirus, we can't forget our other natural disasters. It was just this last fall that we were impacted by fires and air quality and smoke. And so we've experienced that now for the last couple years. And so we have to be aware that could impact what we do in our schools. In addition, we haven't experienced a major earthquake recently, but that has also been in our history as well. So we're going to watch for the state budget revise in August. We anticipate after August, sometime around December or January, they'll probably come out with another revise. And we just want to reiterate why we keep a reserve. You use it when you have to, but once you use it, it's gone forever. It's like a savings account. And it does protect students, staff, and the public. It allows the district the ability to consider a multi-year plan, so you don't devastate a school district's program, and it doesn't devastate one group of students or one group of people. You can consider the reserve. It's like a buffer or a crutch from your one-time savings account. It helps you get through economic uncertainties and spread the pain out over several years. Once it's spent, it is gone forever unless it's replenished, and it's really hard to put money aside when you're dealing with major multi-million-dollar reductions in state funding. So these reserves do provide us that ability to be strategic when we're considering these expenditure reductions and our multi-year plan. These last two slides are just graphs of how our reserve, our fund balance is being spent down over the years. And then we do chart our annual operating losses or our operating surpluses or deficits. And what's interesting is here we are in 1920, and we're starting to operate at a deficit because of this, the fiscal impact from the coronavirus. And we need a plan that gets us back up to break even. What happened 10 years ago in the Great Recession is why do we have a positive spike here during that time is Benicia was the recipient of that time. They called it federal era dollars. And we added up over the years. Benicia received over $4 million in federal funding during the Great Recession. And I mentioned earlier, right now, we have only received $190,000 because that was based on our Title I program, and this was based on enrollment. And so we really need any future federal assistant money to come in based on enrollment for us to get the benefit of that. So I only have a few more slides to wrap this up. And when we put our budget together, we kind of certify it to our county office. We self-certify how we're doing and how well we think we're doing. We use that governor's May revise. We document and make it clear that we are facing budget cuts over the next several years. As a district, we want to maintain that state's minimum 3% reserve. But we want to point out that it is highly likely, and in this scenario, our district will have to draw upon its board policy reserve in that outer year. This just reminds us, again, the state of California provides us the major amount of our revenues through this local control funding formula. It's based on kids attending school. It's going to be about $8,400. That number was approaching $10,000 before the coronavirus took effect. We do get the base grant plus about a 20% increase for our unduplicated students who are in the free and reduced program, free and reduced lunch program, or English learner or foster youth, and it's about so it is a little bit of a bump. In order to get those funds, I mentioned earlier about the Lcff, our local control accountability plan. It's been put on hold right now until the fall, but we'll continue to reach out to our folks as much as we can to do what we need to do as we get new information. The final slide shows our next steps. We have this budget tonight for you as part of the public hearing, and in 2 weeks we'll bring this budget back to you and ask the board to approve it at the school board meeting on June 11th. Once it's approved, we forward that budget to the Solano County Office of Education and the California Department of Education, and that's going to be before the state wraps everything up and the governor finds an official final budget, but he'll do that. And he should do that by June 30th. And so once that, if there are any changes on the actual budget that the governor signs at the end of June, then we get that information in July and report back to the school board and to the community about what those impacts will be. And so that concludes the information that I have to share tonight with you for our budget for next year.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Pretty extensive, Tim, and I want to really thank you for doing those extended years that we discussed, because that certainly put a very different look, and it helped to better clarify and understand how we would be able to use those reserves and what those reserves will do for the district as we move forward. So I really appreciate the extra work and the extra time that it took. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Tim while we are in the open hearing?
I have one question. So of course, we've been talking about these $2 million budget cuts, and our plan at this point is next Thursday, we will be looking at a list of potential cuts. Is that correct?
Yes, that is my understanding. Can I ask Superintendent Young to just comment, clarify that? That is my understanding. We have a special board meeting next Thursday on June 4th.
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the step in the process. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, then I think once again, Tim, I'm going to say thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
It was a pretty extensive piece of information for us tonight to all sit down and think about as we move into our next board meeting. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to reopen our board meeting for this evening. So we are now back. And I'm going to go to number 13, which is a non-consent item, and it is an action item, and it is an update and a discussion on district learning, including feedback, engagement, and grading, with consideration and approval for amending the Curtin Board Administrative Regulation AR 5121 on grading. Dr. Beatson.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me back. Thanks, Tim. Also, that was really well done. So I'm bringing back to you some more information on grading, and then Stephanie Rice will take over at the end and share a few more highlights of what's been happening with distance learning since we met last. So what I'm going to propose through this is that we make an amendment to the board administrative regulation as it relates to incompletes, and based on our conversation that we had last time, to extend that to students receiving below a C- in high school. So, and the purpose for that was to give them the chance and the opportunity to learn the material, to bring up their grade if needed, so that it wouldn't affect any potential admissions to UC, CSU, which requires a C- or better. And then, like I said, Stephanie will give some updates on distance learning. Just a reminder, because I know we've talked a lot about this idea of flexible grading, I wanted to pause for a second and just remind everyone how we came to the decision to stay with our current board policy around grading. A really key factor for us was to keep the learning going, to signal that school did not end on March 17th, or I think that was the date that was our first official distance learning day, that schools were still open. Our teachers worked really hard to identify the key essential standards that they felt were critical for students to learn and know and be able to do by the end of the school year. And to support students in getting that done, we talked about using flexible grading. So having a lot of teachers using these things that you see up here on the screen: extended time, providing full credit for assignments that are late, reducing required work, providing feedback and redos before grading, and then some even looking at shifting the quarters to benefit the students based on whichever quarter 3 or 4 they were performing better at, based on the needs of the course and what was happening. But all of that are strategies within sticking with our regular grading system. We also had a piece in there that we talked a lot about, which was the ability for teachers, along with their administrators, to use an alternative grading system to support students that had extenuating circumstances. And we didn't, we had a lot of conversation about not doing sort of a blanket one size fits all, going to a pass fail or credit no credit, or even just using third quarter grades, because there were a lot of unknowns and inconsistencies in those practices back then, but that we also wanted to recognize and support students who had significant things happening during this school closure. So parents have lost work or all kinds of things. And so together with their teachers and administrators to look at the individual students, because we didn't want to just say, you don't have to learn anymore, but what pieces of this can you do and how can we modify this to make it work for you and use alternative grading if needed. So we did have that as a factor in there as well. So the recommendation is to amend the current language in the Grading Administrative Regulation 5121. And these are the two pieces that have been recommended to change. And that is the section that calls for 9th through 12th graders being able to get incompletes, and you'll see the recommendation on the next page. And the other piece that needed adjustment was the part that said an incomplete shall be given only when a student's work is not finished because of illness or other excused absence. And then if not made up within 6 weeks, the incomplete shall become an F. So those are the two major components in the administrative regulation that we're recommending get adjusted. And this is the proposal. So the proposal is to use incompletes in place of a grade that is below a C- for students in grades 9 through 12. And again, that's to accommodate giving students the option to an opportunity to remake up and relearn those key essential standards. It wouldn't be for the entire semester, and so that it wouldn't affect any college admissions, because we had heard that was a concern. And then for students in grades 6 to 8, because that college piece was not a factor for them, students that were getting an F would be able to also get that incomplete. And so the nitty gritty of it is when quarter 4 grade, if a student receives an F in quarter 4 and that F brings the overall semester grade, because semesters are the only things that show up on transcripts, to a grade lower than a C- for 9 through 12 or an F in grades 6 through 8, the student may choose to receive an incomplete, or they can keep the grade earned during quarter 4. If they choose the incomplete, they will need to make up that learning, and they can do that through some summer school opportunities or other opportunities that'll come out throughout their entire year at that level. So if they're in middle school, they need to clear that incomplete by the end of middle school. If they're in high school, they'd need to clear that incomplete by the end of high school. And once that's completed, the semester 2 incomplete would be replaced with the grade earned, and the credit would be awarded for that. And that would only be for the key assignments that teachers are working on now, identifying for the different courses for quarter 4. So typically an incomplete is for a whole semester, and they'd have to make up that whole semester. Right now, if it's just a quarter 4 issue, we would say we'd only have to make up those quarter 4 assignments. So that said, students who were already failing the class before the closure in quarter 3 they could get the incomplete, but they'd have to make up the whole semester, because it's about the learning and making sure that kids learn the key instructional material. And again, having that grace period of really extending that time, especially because we don't know what the fall is going to look like again. So we didn't want to limit the time and say it needed to be done this summer, because we know that kids probably need a break too. And so this summer, or right at the beginning of the school year when that may look different. So extending it through their high school career to clear that incomplete. And that this grading policy, if adopted, would be in effect for this quarter. And then we would need to relook at what next year would need, if there would be any changes that would be needed based on whatever model we have in place at that time. And so my recommendation is that the board adopt this amended policy. But if you have other questions, please let me know, and then we can finish the rest of the presentation if that's okay with you, President Ferrucci, after this piece.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions?
I had one question.
Okay.
So for 12th graders that would take an incomplete, they would need to complete their work by the end of summer. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we have summer school options coming up, and I know our counselors are enrolling students now. We use Odysseyware because, again, we didn't know if we were going to be able to bring students back. And so we've always used Odysseyware as an online platform, and the teachers would go in and identify key portions. They wouldn't have to do the whole course, and that would be the fourth quarter makeup, if you will.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Okay, can I call for a motion to approve the grading policy changes?
Move that
I'll move
we-
to,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Mark.
I move that we approve the grading policy changes as written here.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, the grading policy proposal is approved as amended. Okay, Dr. Beatson, you want to continue?
Sure. Thank you so much. And I will get that message out to all secondary administrators. And so at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie. This is a piece of the presentation we didn't get to do last week because we were running so late. But just again, it's important to keep shouting out the highlights of the good work our teachers are doing. And so we wanted to just share a couple of things with you. So Stephanie, I'll turn that over to you.
All right, thank you. So the highlights I bring to you tonight are going to focus on how teachers are supporting our students in staying organized, having outlets of expression, collaborative group work, choice learning, and engagement. So this first sample here comes from a high school AP psychology teacher, Mr. Starkweather, and he worked with his students on just creating ways to manage the realm of Google Classroom and this distance learning. In Google Classroom, there are calendar forms, so students can see day by day what is due, and it helps them to stay up on what they're doing. You can go to the next slide, please. This sample is from Miss Sillinen. It's another high school example. And this is a 9th grade art class. And this is one of the samples that shows tapping into student expression and outlet. And as you can see here, this student chose the word faith to show a word that represented what got them through a moment in their life. And then they had to have an animal character that represents them. And having a high schooler of my own, this is not her work, but a sloth is quite appropriate for some of our teenagers. All right, next slide. And then here, we're not going to open all of them, but if you could, Dr. Beatson, just click on the economics at the top. We won't go through it all, but if you just, I think, click. Thank you. This shows an example of teachers working together on keeping kids connected and having group projects. This project here shows them working on supply and demands through this project. Also in this project, they were to bring in things from our community. This one, they focus on fox and fawn and some of the other businesses on First Street. And we won't go through all this, but they also take in consideration what's going on now in our economy.
You want me to keep going through this one?
No, go ahead and close out. They can go through that as they'd like, but they're fantastic. And then don't click on the U.S. history, but the U.S. history there by Miss Evangelo, just to let you know if you want to click on when you have a spare moment. It shows an example of our teachers creating some teaching videos to forward prepare the students, and then she did some follow-up question and answer. And then Mr. Barrett from Robert Simple, he's a 4th grade teacher, and this project represents giving students choice. So he was teaching our writing standards, focusing on research, and they did a project having to do with their favorite type of music, and they were allowed to pick a way to show their expression, and then they showed it through their writing as well.
And so
And we can go ahead and click out of that just to give them a sneak peek. Mr. Shelton, he is a 5th grade teacher, and this is an example, and we won't play all the video, but if you mute it, Dr. Beatson, we just hit the, yep.
Hello, boys and girls. May the 4th be with you.
Is it playing?
Today's
It is playing.
Star Wars theme.
It's okay. I'll talk through it. So this just shows an example of teachers trying to be creative. One, Mr. Shelton was talking about trying to engage his students. He's made some videos with himself, but this is his Bitmoji, and he is teaching fractions, our math standard. And this gives the students visual representations of the teaching point. And then he followed up with his students with his office hours to support those who needed further support. So just a catchy way to catch those 5th graders' attention. Thank you. And then before we'll go on to that one. Never mind. It's okay. To almost wrap this up, this is our almost littles. These are our TKs. We have preschoolers as well. But this presentation here, and you can just kind of click through it, Dr. Beatson, just shows that our TK students are still connecting with their teachers through Zoom and Google Classroom. That shows their Clever portal and all the things they have access to. Their teachers also sent them with some things. This is them making their letter flashcards to learn their letters and sounds. As we move through further, you'll see them, that's them here, using their fine motor by drawing and uploading pictures of what they're doing for their teachers to see. This one following directions, which is so important also with all students, but especially our littles. And you see all the smiles, creating rainbows to show their unity in their home across our town. Pirate Day, our TKs really get into the sounds. That's what they teach the letter R, because pirates say R, and they're dressed up. Math. And you can just see still the joy that they're getting by showing their learning to their TK teachers.
Do you want me to keep going?
Oh, we can click back out. Okay. And just to let you know, that was the TK up top, but the bottom picture there, that's Mrs. McIntosh. She's one of our 2nd grade teachers. And I just thought this encapsulated how much our teachers are still trying to connect with their classes. Mrs. McIntosh said, on her laptop, she just couldn't get a sense of how her kids were feeling. So she figured out a way to project it onto her TV so she could see their faces bigger and just really get a sense of how they were feeling. So I just, again, want to give a shout out to our teachers for just diving in to this situation and really making the most out of it, and our students for being resilient and still striving to do their best in these times. So thank you for letting me share these highlights, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing those. Those are awesome. Okay, so are there any other comments or questions? We're at the end of our agenda. Just going to remind everybody, we are back again next Thursday, same time, same station. And I will see you all as we have our next board meeting on June 4th. Thank you and good night. The meeting is over.